There is a $2 bag of jasmine rice on my desk right now, roughly 25,000 grains. Each one is the product of a flooded field that required more coordinated human labor than any other crop in history. Rice fed roughly half of everyone alive last year, and somehow it costs less than the coffee I made this morning. I want to talk about how that price got that low because the answer is not the one you think, and it's not just a story about farming, it's a story about how civilizations organize themselves, and eventually how they don't. Every empire that centralized rice production eventually collapsed from the same problem. Tang China, Angkor, Ayutthaya, Bengal, Myanmar, same crops, same mechanism, same ending. Rice is a stress test for civilization, and once you know what the test measures, you can't unsee it. Let me actually walk through this because the shape of the problem is wilder than I expected. Here's the thing that rearranged the whole subject for me. Rice is not just another cereal grain. Rice is the only major staple crop where the coordination is the crop. You can grow wheat alone. A single family, a single field, a single season, wheat works. You can grow maize alone, you can grow potatoes alone, but paddy rice cannot exist without someone controlling the water that goes into it, the water that stays in it, and the water that leaves. That means an authority, not a metaphorical authority, a literal human being upstream who decides when your field gets flooded and when it doesn't. A wheat farmer historically can be free. A rice farmer historically cannot. Someone has to control the watershed. And wherever paddy rice becomes the staple, the political system reorganizes itself around water control, not around commerce, not around conquest. Water. This is the same machine I've been describing on this channel for a while now. With coffee, it was the seed. With bananas, it was the land. With vanilla, it was the label. With rice, it's the water. The crop chose the political system, not the other way around. And that single sentence is the entire thesis of this video. Now, if you've watched a rice history video before, there's a good chance it opened with a mystical Asian civilization story, the cradle of Eastern culture, the spiritual harmony between the farmer and the flooded field, the special genius of specific dynasties. I want to be careful here because the real story is less mystical and more mechanical, and the mystical version flatters the viewer while explaining nothing. This is the dancing goats of rice. Here's the actual story. Wet rice paddies produce roughly 10 times the calories per acre of a comparable wheat field at the same technology level. 10 times. That is not a small advantage. That is a staggering advantage. But there's a cost hidden inside that number. The only way to get that yield is to submerge the field. The only way to submerge the field is to control the water. The only way to control the water is to have authority over an entire watershed. So the sequence writes itself. Paddy technology creates surplus calories. Surplus calories create dense population. Dense population requires water infrastructure. Water infrastructure requires central authority. Central authority becomes the state. The state defends the water. And the special thing about a rice civilization isn't spiritual. It's that rice let it get bigger than any other agricultural society at its technology level. That bigness carried the seed of its own collapse inside it. I'll come back to that seed of collapse. First, I need to show you what the coordination actually looked like on the ground because the number is genuinely absurd. 1 hectare of paddy rice in traditional cultivation requires somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 person hours of labor per year. Wheat is around 200 hours. Maize is around 250. Rice is 5 to 7 times more labor intensive than any other major staple, and every one of those hours is coordinated. The transplanting window is days, not weeks. The flooding schedule cannot drift. The harvest is compressed into a narrow window before the grain shatters. If your village's water fails, the whole crop fails. Not just your plot, the whole crop. Now think about what a state has to do to keep that system running at scale. Tang China, 7th through 9th century, built the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal was over 1,700 kilometers long. It was designed to move rice from the wet, productive south to the political center in the arid north. Building it and maintaining it took hundreds of thousands of conscripted laborers for generations. Angkor, 9th through 15th century, built a hydraulic complex that archaeologists are still measuring. Barai reservoirs, canals, spillways, distribution channels. At its peak, Angkor supported a city of roughly 750,000 people, larger than any European city at the time. The whole system existed to store and redistribute monsoon water for rice. The engineering was extraordinary. The dependency it created was total. Rice civilizations aren't organized around water. They are their water system. Take out the water infrastructure, and there's nothing left to be organized. organized. And that 1,500 hours per hectare, some of those hours were done by children kept home from school during transplanting week. Some of them were done by conscripts. Some of them were coerced. Some of them historically were called something worse. The coordination has to come from somewhere. It always does. So you have this incredible machine. And here's where the machine turns on itself. Case 1, Tang, China. At its height, the Tang dynasty was moving rice from the Yangtze Delta up the Grand Canal to feed the capital at Chang'an, which for a while was the largest city on earth. In 755, a general named An Lushan started a rebellion. The rebellion itself was regional. It didn't take the capital right away, and it didn't destroy the productive land in the south. What it did was cut the canal. And here's the number that hit me hardest when I read it. Within roughly a decade of the canal disruption, census records suggest that something like 2/3 of the empire's registered population had died or been displaced. Historians debate exactly what that census collapse represents. How much was death? How much was migration? How much was administrative failure to count people? But whatever the exact number, this much is clear. The rebellion was regional. The starvation was national. The state that had built the surplus could not survive the failure of its own logistics. Case 2, Angkor. For 4 centuries, Angkor ran the largest pre-industrial city in the world on a single hydraulic system. Then in the 14th and 15th centuries, something happened that the system had never been designed for. Climate archaeologists, Mary Beth Day, Roland Fletcher, and the Greater Angkor Project pulled sediment cores from the berets and found something specific. Back-to-back mega droughts, followed by mega monsoons. The infrastructure could handle average variance. It could not handle extreme variance. Canals silted up. Spillways failed. Nobody sacked Angkor. There was no invasion, no siege, no dramatic fall. The water system aged out. The population dispersed south to what eventually became Cambodia, and a city that had once rivaled anything in Europe became a set of temples in a forest. Case 3. This is where the pattern jumps forward 1,000 years and doesn't change shape at all. Bengal, 1943, somewhere between 2 and 3 million people starved to death. Rice was physically available in the region. The colonial administration had reorganized rice distribution to prioritize war logistics, feeding the military, moving stockpiles for strategic reserve. When the distribution system failed, people starved next to full warehouses. Myanmar, 2008. Cyclone Nargis hit the Irrawaddy Delta, which grew most of the country's rice. The military junta controlled relief distribution. They obstructed international aid for weeks. An estimated 140,000 people died, and many observers believe that number is low. Same shape as Tang, China, 1,200 years earlier. The system that produced the calories was the same system that couldn't recover from a shock. That's the seed of collapse I mentioned earlier. It was always inside the surplus. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The very thing that lets a rice civilization exist. The pooled labor, the water control, the coordinated calendar, the central authority that keeps the canals cleared is the thing that has no way to fail gracefully. Wheat farms can fail one at a time. Rice systems fail all at once, or not at all. That's why the collapse pattern rhymes. Tang, China wasn't unique. Angkor wasn't cursed. Bengal wasn't just colonial cruelty, though it was that too. Myanmar 2008 wasn't just a bad government, though it was that too. Every one of these was a rice civilization that couldn't survive its own logistics. Rice is a stress test for civilization. It's the crop that reveals whether a society can organize without enslaving, and historically the answer has almost always been no. The coordination has to come from somewhere. It usually comes out of somebody who couldn't say no. Which brings me back to the bag on my desk. $2, less than the coffee I made this morning. How? Roughly 90% of the world's rice is consumed in the country where it's grown. Only about 10% trades internationally, but that 10% sets everyone's price. In 2008, India, Vietnam, and Egypt restricted rice exports within weeks of each other. Rice prices in the Philippines nearly tripled, not from a crop failure, from a coordination failure. Countries hoarding because they had watched other countries hoard. In 2022, India banned exports of non-basmati white rice. Prices spiked across West Africa within a month. If you've watched my video on bananas, you've already seen what happens when a global commodity has too few choke points. Rice is the same shape at civilization scale. The cheap bag on my desk is possible because the coordination has moved from imperial canals to international shipping contracts. Same mechanism, wearing a different suit. We haven't outgrown the rice civilization problem. We've just outsourced it. That $2 bag on my desk is still there. I'm still going to cook it, but I look at it differently now. The question isn't whether rice is a good deal deal at the checkout? The question is where the coordination cost went, because it went somewhere. It always goes somewhere. In Tang, China, it went into the canals. In Angkor, it went into the berets. In Bengal, it went into the distribution system that failed in 1943. In your kitchen tonight, it went somewhere too. I pull apart something else from everyone's kitchen every week. If this one stuck with you, I'll see you in the next one.